All right. Thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Cool. All right. Well, hello everyone. I'm Evan Lapine. I am the Director of Development here at Washington Wild. I was the one sending you all those fun email invites to this event this week. So thanks everybody for joining. Happy Earth Day, Earth Week. Again, so happy that you can join us this evening. We've had an incredible run here of nice weather, so I hope everybody's been able to get out and enjoy it, go on some adventures. At Washington Wild, we continue to celebrate over 40 years of our organization protecting our wildlands and waters. And before we get going with the rest of our program, we're going to show you a short video narrated by former Washington Governor and Conservation Champion Daniel J. Evans. So Chris, can you bring that up for us?
Yes, one sec.
On a September evening in 1979, a handful of conservation activists met at the College Inn in Seattle's University District. Hours later, a new organization was born, Washington Wilderness Coalition.
So I've lived in Washington State for 30 years, and it is a diverse state in that it has the Pacific Ocean, mountains, rainforests, deserts, lakes, rivers. Washington Wild is a local organization that protects all of that for all of us. And that is why I'm a proud volunteer for the Washington Wild organization.
Today known as Washington Wild, over the past 40 years, the organization has led efforts to protect nearly 3 million acres of designated wilderness throughout Washington State.
I'm Yvonne Krause. I'm the Executive Director of the Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance. We as mountain bikers have been working with Washington Wild on a very unique challenge of wanting to support wilderness and supporting that in Washington State, and at the same time losing access when we do so. So it's a unique challenge for us as mountain bikers. It's a very rare partnership with Washington Wild. We've been able to make that happen together, looking at wilderness boundaries, looking at trail alignments, looking at what gives us the best access for both mountain bikers and resource protection. It's very unique. It's been a very treasured partnership, and I look forward to that partnership for 40 more years.
Washington Wild brings people together in the vigorous defense of our remaining ancient forests, free-flowing rivers, wildlife habitat, and clean air and water.
My name is Brian Clattisby, chairman of the Swinomish tribe, and when Swinomish partnered with Washington Wild, we knew it was going to be a good fit to oppose this mining in the headwaters of the Skagit River, which is the only one in the lower 48 that still has every species of wild salmon still spawning in its tributaries. And in 7 generations, our kids need to be standing here telling the same story to those that need to know.
While much has changed over the past 40 years, our national parks, forests, and other public lands are under increasing threats from unregulated mining, new dam construction, and other development.
You must have good quality water to make good quality beer. Being a craft brewer and a fairly small craft brewer compared to the big breweries, we're reliant on producing a quality, consistent product. So locally, we try and do a lot to keep our river clean and pure. And working with Washington Wild, it just helps to expand that throughout the state to keep our natural resources pure. And as a brewery, it's just so important.
Key to their success is building powerful grassroots networks and winning coalitions around protecting our public lands and wild places.
The mission of Washington Wild to make sure that we preserve low areas where families can have access and for salmon spawning is really critical over the coming 50 years, because that's the kind of wilderness that we will be able to use for generations to come. Washington Wild does a great job that's very unique. It brings together communities, different partnerships to be able to establish the road to get wilderness through Congress. It's not easy to pass legislation. You have to bring people in a community together, different organizations, bring together a whole coalition of people to get the kind of energy to get legislation through Congress. That's what Washington Wild does uniquely and very well.
Join me in supporting Washington Wild's leadership in protecting and defending our local wildlands and waters today and for the next 40 years.
All right. I've probably seen that video 25 or 30 times, and every time I see it, I just get so excited to want to go out and, you know, do my next adventure. So I hope that that did a little bit for everybody on the call this evening. Next, I'd like to introduce you all to my colleague, Tara Peters, who is our Communications and Engagement Manager. Tara, happy Earth Week. Oh, are you on mute?
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me now? All right. Happy Earth Week. Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. Before we jump in, we'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that this evening's program is coming to you from the ancestral land of Coast Salish peoples, including the Suquamish and Duwamish peoples past and present. Further, we acknowledge that our organization's work encompasses the traditional lands of all tribes in Washington state. We honor with gratitude the land itself and those who have been the responsible stewards of these lands and waters since time immemorial. We are grateful to our Native Coalition partners and would like to acknowledge to them, as well as all of our supporters, that as we work in conservation and protection of what are now known as public lands, the narratives of these lands and regions have not always fully recognized the peoples who live here before colonization and continue to live here today. Thank you all for respecting this important history as we move forward together in our work to protect and restore Washington's wildlands for generations to come. And we encourage you to learn more about the native lands and communities that you reside on by visiting native-land.ca. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tara. Here at Washington Wild, we pride ourselves on our ability to build winning partnerships within our community that strengthen our work through advocacy, fundraising, and taking action through our comment letters. Throughout the evening, we're going to share with you our current work, as well as feature some of our great community partners. Now I'd like to introduce Washington Wild's Executive Director, Tom Uniack. Happy Earth Week, Tom.
Thanks, Evan. Hey, welcome everybody. Happy Earth Day Eve. Yeah, so I'm going to talk to you just briefly about, you know, Washington Wild and kind of the theme of building winning partnerships and doing stuff together, not alone, which is very much what we do. We're going to pull up some slides real quick. I'm going to run through those. And my background here is Royal Creek in the Wild Olympics, which we're actually been working to protect and making some progress. So yeah, so Washington Wild is about building winning partnerships. So that's very much a lot of what we do. We've been doing that for more than 40 years. Next slide. So a lot of people question, we get a lot of people have on their mind, Why are there so many environmental groups? Fair question. Well, I can answer that from Washington Wild's perspective. It's all about niche, right? And Washington Wild has a very unique niche, important niche in Washington State. We're a local statewide group that focuses on protecting wildlands and waters. For example, there are other groups in Oregon and Montana that focus on similar things statewide, but we're the one in Washington. We really bring a commitment to building winning coalitions that create a large tent, that bring, businesses, elected officials, faith leaders, tribes, all these folks finding common ground, bring them together with one voice. And we've been doing that since 1979, and we're still doing that. And I know, having been at Washington Wild for 17 years, I find that there's less people that want to do that or are willing to do that. But at Washington Wild, it really is a focal point. And we also balance kind of the short-term defense, like threats to logging and mining threats to our lands. We've seen a lot of those over the last 4 years, but we also balance that with really pushing for long-term protections, protecting places like the Wild Sky Wilderness or, the Alpine Lakes additions. So next slide. So this idea of where we fit in this this niche is about 10 years ago, I made a point that if I was going to write a letter on a local conservation issue, either opposing a threat or supporting the protection, that I was going to not just sign it by Washington Wild, I was going to open that up and make it a sign-on letter, kind of to engage more folks, to get more voices, but also to kind of create capacity for other organizations that maybe didn't have the ability to, focus on that or learn about that. And since over the last decade, we've had about 85 of those sign-on letters that Washington Wild has coordinated. And here's just a little graphic that shows kind of the different organizations that have signed on at different rates. Over those 10 years, we've had 370 organizations sign on to our letters on different issues. An organization like the Wilderness Society, which is a very similar mission to us, but is actually a national organization, obviously is signed on as like the most of those. But other organizations like Conservation Northwest, which is a statewide kind of wildlife-focused organization, and Washington Trails Association, a recreation group, has signed on to more than half. Other groups like Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance, and then local regional groups like North Cascades Audubon, Trout Unlimited, representing hunting and fishing perspective, has signed on to a number of our letters, as well as businesses like Fremont Brewery through our Brewshed Alliance, and land trusts like Forterra. Also chambers of commerce like the Skycomas Chamber of Commerce in Sultan, Washington. Next slide. That just gives you a sense of kind of where we're kind of in the middle of a lot of this stuff. Next, I just want to run through a couple of accomplishments that where we've built kind of coalitions around issues in the past. In August of 2015, there was a proposal by the U.S. Army to actually do combat helicopter training up in the North Cascades for high altitude training. And they didn't really think through that a lot. They had just a lot, they knew what they wanted to do, but it had significant impacts on wildlife, on conservation. They had landing sites in a designated wilderness. And so Washington Wild did a letter that raised concerns about that, and we got 67 diverse groups to sign on to that, and that coalition mattered. In the end, the Army rethunk its proposal and actually rescinded it, so they went another direction and didn't have the impacts on all those values. Next slide. Another example in 2019 is that Washington Wild put together another sign-on letter with 25 different organizations, conservation, recreation, some elected officials, supporting funding to basically protect state lands as natural resource conservation areas in 2 areas on the Olympic Peninsula and the North Cascades. And ultimately, that was an important factor in nearly 1,000 acres being protected within the Dabob Bay and Middle Fork Snoqualmie National Resource Conservation Areas. Next slide. And then more recently, Washington Wild worked with a coalition of tribes and Trout Unlimited and Sierra Club, and really coordinated a big sign-on letter and some media efforts with a coalition that we built of 160 organizations statewide, very diverse, that was pushing legislation through in Olympia that would actually ban the practice of motorized suction dredge mining, which is kind of a salmon's worst nightmare, where they turn over the gravel in salmon streams to find traces of gold, but has real big impacts on salmon habitat and spawning. Ultimately, Jay Inslee signed that law in March of 2020 and banned that practice on rivers designated as critical salmon habitat in Washington. So next slide. So lastly, I just want to leave you with kind of what we're working on now in 2021. And some of the folks you'll hear from next are partners of ours that are helping us, kind of raise support and money for our work. And this is kind of two of the main issues that we're leading coalitions on and working on. The first is the Wild Olympics legislation, which is, one of these long-term protection proposals that has been in Congress for several years. It's passed the House already early in the session, which is a really great sign. And we're working to get it through the Senate, which is, of course, the next step. And this coalition includes, over 800 local supporters in the Olympic Peninsula. These are local businesses and elected officials. It also includes, 21,000, individuals that have signed the petition in Washington State supporting that, including about 12,000 in the Olympic Peninsula locally. And what this bill would do would permanently protect 460 miles of wild and scenic rivers, the first ever on the Olympic Peninsula, and also protect, add 126,000 acres of wilderness to Olympic National Forest, which would be, permanently protected from logging and mining. So that's one thing that we're working on, and we'll keep you tuned in on how you can help over the next, several months. Next slide. And finally, a few years ago, Washington Wild stepped in to kind of create and coordinate a coalition around something you might have read in the Seattle Times, this mining and logging threats in the headwaters of the Skagit River, which are actually in Canada. The Skagit River doesn't flow through Canada very long until it goes to Washington State through North Cascades National Park. It flows through the Skagit Wild and Scenic River, through the beautiful Skagit Valley, creates drinking water for many local communities, including Mount Vernon, Anacortes, and then ultimately provides 30% of the fresh water into the Puget Sound. Skagit River is one of the few rivers that has all 5 species of salmon in it, and both British Columbia and Washington share the southern resident killer whale population, which relies on Chinook salmon for its recovery. So these downstream values were really, really important to Washington State, even though the mining and logging threat was happening up in Canada. And so we've coordinated an international coalition, which is kind of interesting for a statewide group. I haven't done that before, of 200 plus, again, elected officials, both sides of the border, conservation recreation groups, land trusts, tribes, and First Nations. And that's been really effective. The logging has been halted in the Donut Hole area, which is unprotected up there in the Skagit headwaters, and the mining is the permit is still pending, although it's been the longest permit pending that I think in Canada's history. So the noise we're making is I think at least slowing things down, but we're working to get that permit denied and to actually ultimately get this land protected so that we can make sure that the Skagit watershed is intact. So I'll leave you with that, just a little bit of a look back and a look forward of what we're working on, but I'm really excited to hear from some of our partners that we're able to work with, and we're gonna have a unique ask for you this Earth Day, which I think you'll like. So I'll turn it over to Evan.
Awesome, thanks, Tom. With everything that Tom had listed on the success that we've had and the things that we're working on, we hope that you feel that success is your success and that we're all part, of this, and it's something that we can be proud of. And we can't do this alone, which is why we have such a big focus on building quality and trustworthy relationships within our community. And so our first guest is Craig Nobley, the GM of Lighthouse Roasters. And we met Craig and the Lighthouse team about a year ago, actually at a charity beer event through our Brewshed Alliance that featured actually a beer from Aslan Brewing. There was also some hints of coffee in there, donated by Lighthouse, and also some hints of chocolate, donated by Theo's Chocolates. And so we all got together. We had a wonderful evening of, celebrating as well as, raising awareness on our efforts. And it gave us a great chance to engage, with a great local business. And we've been able to do some really other cool projects with Lighthouse over the past 4 years. So our first guest here, Craig, how you doing? Happy Earth Week. Oh, I think you might be on mute.
There we go.
All right, we're back. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks again for joining us, Craig. I know that we've definitely had an interesting, but also really fun, past year, and it's been great, further partnering with you guys. And I know we have a great fundraiser that's going on currently with you guys, with the Washington Wild Blend. But I actually have some right here. This is I don't even know how many bags of this that I've actually gotten so far, but it smells great, it looks great, it tastes great. And so we'd love just to hear a little bit from you on, the blend itself, but also, just what about Washington Wild really, makes for a successful partnership with Lighthouse.
Well, yeah, Lighthouse is very excited to be part of and, partnered up with Washington Wild to do our part to, shine some light on what your organization does for Washington residents and protecting our wildlands and our riverways and such. And so we decided to come up with a little custom blend for Washington Wild. And that is a blend of some natural Ethiopian coffee and a couple of Central American coffees. So it makes for a very delicious cup of coffee. And out of those purchases, $2 of each pound sold will get directly donated back to Washington Wild. So we're excited to do that. Hopefully that'll kick some money your way, but more importantly, I think what it does is just shine some light on what you do and what your organization does for all of us here and for our local environment. So we'd just like to say thank you very much to Washington Wild for what you do, and we are very proud to be teamed up with you and partnered up with you, and hopefully we can make this a long-lasting relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. We got the fundraiser started. I think it was the second week of March, and we did a fun little coffee and conservation virtual chat. But after that first month, which was just over, I think, 2.5 weeks, how many pounds of the Washington Wild Blend did you guys sell?
After the first 2 weeks, we're about 260 pounds.
Which is awesome. So, yeah, I was pretty blown away by that. But hey, when you live in a community that just absolutely loves coffee, but also you guys have a fantastic place there in Fremont, and there's always a line out the door. So it's been great, just seeing those updates. And I know all of our staff has been able to get down there as well and get bags, and we try and take as many photos of us buying it and drinking it, and as much as we can, just to share that. So thank you again so much, Craig.
That's great. We're very happy to be part of it.
Wonderful. Cool. Well, next, I'll be introducing my colleague, Chris Chappell, who is our conservation and brew shed manager. Chris, happy Earth Week.
Hey, Evan, happy Earth Week. Thanks for that introduction. So I'm going to kind of go over a little bit about the Brew Shed Alliance and the work we do, and then we'll introduce our friend Rick with Big Time Brewing Co. So the Brew Shed Alliance is a group of around 70 brewers, maltsters, hop growers, pubs, etc., that support Washington Wild and our conservation work under the idea that in order to have good beer, you need great water. And in order to have good water, you're going to need to be protecting the wildlands and waterways and watersheds that produce that water. I'm a firm believer that up here in Seattle and the Pacific Northwest as a whole, we have the best beer in the world. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. One, we've got, awesome locally grown ingredients, hops down in the Yakima Valley, grain grown across the state, especially in the Skagit Valley, that's malted by local malt houses. And then we also have this pure mountain water that really allows brewers this strong base. So, these people in the beer industry understand the importance of protecting these waterways. And so they support Washington Wild and are members of the Brewshed Alliance through a number of ways. So, in normal times, we'll be doing some tap takeovers, some, pub fundraisers, education events, whatnot. They also sign on to a lot of our comment letters. Sign on letters to support or oppose, different conservation things. Actually, we're running right now in support of the Wild Olympics. So we've got about 30 breweries and brewshed partners on board, including Big Time, which is pretty exciting. And then we also do these really cool collaboration beers. So there are opportunities to raise a little bit of funds for Washington Wild's work, but also, as an education piece on conservation as a whole. So we did this really cool one with Big Time Brewery, Upstream IPA. It's got this awesome salmon on it. And it was made with all donated hops from Yakima Chief Hops and all donated grain from Skagit Valley Malting. And so, the concept of Upstream IPA is what what goes on upstream affects those of us downstream. So now I'm going to introduce Rick and let him talk about, how, a little bit about Big Time, how the beer came about, and, being a brewshed partner in general. Can you hear me, Rick?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me, Chris?
Yeah, you're great.
Ah, cheers. I think this says happy hour, but I haven't seen anybody else drinking a beer yet. But yeah, so Big Time is Seattle's longest running brewery and original brew pub. We've been open for over 32 years, and we just try to make great beer and great food. And we have a dear friend named Ben Kieran, who is the owner and manager over at Watershed Pub and Kitchen. And he's like, hey guys, we got this great Brewshed program going on. You should join on. And I just said, well, Ben, are you a part of it? He's like, yeah, I'm a part of it. I'm like, well, if you're a part of it, Big Time's going to be a part of it. And then we met Chris and fell in love with the organization. And we're like, wow, we got to team up and, create some awareness and try to raise some, money for you guys and hit the ground running. So we all got together and came up with this awesome IPA. And then Yakima Chief, God, they're so great. They donated all the hops, and Skagit Valley Malting donated all the malt. And we're like, hey, let's make this happen. And made this awesome IPA. It's sad to say it's sold out, but there's lots of other good beer out there that is going to a good fund. And we just decided to try to raise as much funds as we could. So I think it was 40% of all proceeds went back to Washington Wild. And it was a tough year to try to do a charity event for a small business, as everybody was getting hit hard. We were getting hit hard, but we only did 2 charity events the whole year, and Washington Wild was our biggest. And we were so excited to not only be a part of the organization, but to be a part of the community, because that's really what you guys are building is community. You're bringing people together. We might represent small businesses or nonprofits or, be politicians, but at the end of the day, we're just a community and we're people. And you're doing a great job bringing us all together and fighting for water rights. And so cheers to Washington Wild. Keep doing what you're doing.
That's so nice, Rick. And I just want to say, the 40% was such a generous thing, and you all have been such great partners working together with Upstream. It's been such a blast. Also, the beer is ridiculously good, and I don't say that lightly. I don't say that I'm very particular about my beer, but y'all crushing.
Yeah. Shout out to Roy. He's my brother and head brewer. He's making great beer, and he was a huge part of this too. So cheers to Roy.
Yeah, cheers to Roy for sure. So now I'm going to throw it over to our communications manager, Tara.
Hey, everyone, can you hear me? Cool. All right. Well, thank you. I just want to say thanks again to Big Time and to Lighthouse and just all the community partners that we work with. A big part of what we try to do is amplify each other's stories and connect the dots for our audiences between the wilderness protection work that we are leading and the important roles that our partners play, and just how this work impacts everyone who enjoys what it is that our partners are offering, whether that's beer, coffee, or dessert. Fortunately, Krista from Hot, who we were going to hear from during this section, had a last-minute scheduling conflict, but I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about our great partnership that we have with Hotcakes. So I'd like to give a little bit of backstory. Our partnership with Hotcakes began in 2016 when the previous owner served on our board of directors. And the relationship is just a really good fit. It's a natural fit. For those who don't know, Hotcakes is a local dessert maker, and they actually got their start at the Ballard Farmers Market back in 2008. So just being in that environment, surrounded by farmers, they built this business which is really rooted in the Pacific Northwest land and its people, using local organic ingredients. They have since grown, and they now have 2 locations. One is a storefront in Ballard, and their more recent one is on Capitol Hill. And they really remain committed to advocating for both wild and farmland protections. And of course, we know that protecting wild lands protects the natural resources that farmers rely on for quality product, and that small businesses like Hotcakes rely on for a quality product as well. So now to talk about quality, Hotcakes has a forest cake right now, which hopefully you will see an image of on your screen of what this looks like. It is top of the line quality. I can attest that it is delicious. It is basically a chocolate lover's heaven. I will just go ahead and read their description because I couldn't say it better myself. A Douglas fir ganache is piped into the center of this dark chocolate cake, paired with a dry burned caramel, vanilla ice cream, and a rosemary Meyer lemon bark, which is what you see right there on top. So it's really good. Hopefully your mouth is watering, and it's important that you know this forest cake is only available as a cake of the month through April 30th. So special Earth Month treat, and that means you have just 9 days to see how many cakes you can eat. And for every forest cake that you eat that is sold, Hotcakes will donate 10% of their sales back to Washington Wild, which is just really amazing. Beyond the financial support, Hotcakes has been helping to tell our story and to connect those dots to dessert lovers across the city, both on site with signage and through social media. So please give them a follow, pay them a visit, and just want to say thanks to Hotcakes for your support, and thanks to all of you for doing your part and eating cake and helping us keep Washington green and wild. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, wow, that looked amazing. So thank you to all of our guests, Rick and Craig, and our great friends at Hotcakes. We truly appreciate how much fun and impactful our partnerships has been, with all of you. And before we get to our final call to action for everybody that's joining us tonight, just wanted to remind everybody that we will be participating in Washington Gives /Give Big, which is a community-sponsored time of giving in support of local nonprofits like ours. So you can make a donation to us. It's actually, it has started earlier this week and will be going through the 5th of May. So hopefully you'll see, kind of some promotions out there about that. So you can donate on our Washington Gives page or directly to our website, which is wawild.org. And also thanks to some generous board members, we have an $8,000 match in place. So your gift will be doubled, which is awesome and something to feel really good about. I know we are a little bit past time, so thank you again for everybody that was able to stick around. And as we wrap up our event, we have a very important call to action to you. And we want you to go out and we want you to drink beer, we want you to drink coffee, and we want you to eat chocolate. Because when you support these businesses, they in turn support us, and everybody wins. So I really feel like I'm struggling to get people to do this call to action, but I believe in you all. I think you can do it, and I hope you will, enjoy a pint out at Big Time in their new outdoor space. Swing by Fremont and get a Washington Wild blend, and head down to Capitol Hill or Ballard and have some forest cake, and treat yourself, because you deserve it on this Earth Day. So again, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. We wouldn't be able to have the type of impact and success without your support. So hopefully you might be able to join us for an in-person event in the future. But for now, thanks for joining us online, and have a great rest of your evening.